Hi, I'm Tim. Welcome to Watchbox, and thanks for logging on. The weekend is underway, and everything you see on this show is for sale. Names, references, and when available, prices in the description below. Reach out to me, tmosso at thewatchbox.com for pricing, accessories, extra photos, anything you want to know about any of the watches on this program. I am also looking to build inventory. Trade a watch, sell a watch. I will buy. I wire cash. We pay fast. No upper limit on value paid. We will buy an entire collection of grand complications with cash. Once again, if you wish to sell or trade a watch, reach out to the same address, tmosso at thewatchbox.com. Let's get started with the watch I promised. You saw the thumbnail. Now here it is. The Rolex Oyster Perpetual Submariner, often called the no-date sub. In fact, this is the original Submariner, the direct descendant of 1953. Technically, the watch with the date is the Submariner Date. This watch is also the descendant of the big crowns worn by James Bond in the classical era of Sean Connery. The watch you see here launched in 2012 and was made through 2020. 114060, 40 millimeters. It's got the super case profile, no Cyclops eye because there is no date, and a beautifully balanced dial in black lacquer with white gold hands and indices. Ceramic bezel insert, 120 click bezel with wonderful click feel. The detent on Rolex bezels is wonderful, and I'm overusing that word, but it's a combination of crisp and creamy that's an unlikely alchemy and unique to, I would say, these Grand Seiko and Cartier dive bezels. They are the best for overall feel and precision. On the wrist, super slim, no Cyclops eye to add thickness, and the watch isn't as broad as you might suspect across the wrist. The cade's about 48 millimeters lug to lug, so that's 48 millimeters lug to lug across the wrist and low enough so it'll sit underneath the dress cuff. Move a little bit away from the camera, you get a better sense of the watch in proportion to my wrist. It is not large. You can wear it on a wrist of 14 centimeters circumference. Quick lume shot because this is a diving watch. As you can see, Rolex Chromolite Blue. You can see the luminescent pearl on the bezel itself. This is Rolex's in-house lume color, designed to be more accessible at depth as natural light fades. 300 meters water resistant. It is a chronometer. 48-hour power reserve, and it has the glide lock system built in, 20 millimeters of adjustment, incremental adjustment in 2 millimeter increments. Great for sizing, also a great all or nothing pull out over a diving suit. Note the watch gives you half links too, so you will get the right fit, you will get the right feel. That said, I am partial to this model, and this would probably be my choice among modern Rolex references that are not dubbed Z Blue. This watch is almost as funky as the Milgauss Z Blue. Reference 114234, combination of stainless steel 904L case and a white gold fluted bezel. It has an extravagant silver satin and concentric dial. You can see outboard there is a sort of sunburst that emanates from an imaginary center point. We have radially arrayed orange, black bordered Arabic numerals. We have an applique Rolex crown in white gold and Arabic numeral 6 inverted in white gold. And then we have this lovely chrome concentric pattern at center. It's much deeper than conventional satination. It's grooved almost like guilloche, and you'll note one of the consequences of that dial treatment is that Rolex prints most of its tome-like volume in round-robin fashion around the center dial. So Oyster Perpetual Superlative Chronometer officially certified. It doesn't mar the dial in block form like, for example, the typical printing on a regular Rolex watch. This one also 48-hour power reserve and a chronometer, 100 meters water resistant, and it's a timepiece that I happen to adore. So while it is a 34 millimeter case, make no mistake that the Oyster case is always read visually large, and just as that 40 millimeter sub looks like a 42 millimeter watch, this 34 looks like a 36, and I would happily wear this watch every day. It's a fun, funky, and even relatively discreet Rolex watch, and those come at a premium. Now, let's say you want to go upmarket, way upmarket. How about Longa? How about a model launched in 2011? Note the presence of a stopworks in a watch where the first quarter turn of the crown starts the movement. That's because there's always enough energy retained in the barrel, courtesy of the stopworks, to instantaneously start the escapement with the slightest turn of the crown. It stops and restarts in the blink of an eye. This model launched in 2011 is 41.9 millimeters in red gold. It is the A Longa und Sonne Richard Longa Tourbillon pour le Mérite. Now, there's a lot going on. Let's break it down. It's the Richard Longa collection. It has a Seifert scale, overlapping scale dial. You can see that it uses the Roman numerals associated with the Richard Longa collection. Richard Longa, a scion of the Longa family, was a watchmaker and a scientist in his day. The dial is made of solid sterling silver, so precious metal hands, precious metal case, precious metal dial. We have a tourbillon, which you can see acts as the second hand for the watch. Note the lovely black polished wire style or filigree tourbillon cage. It does feature an overcoil hairspring. It is adjusted by hand. Now, because there is a gap that allows you access to the tourbillon, you can't easily read the time between 8 o'clock and 10 o'clock. So, note the use of stop seconds or hacking with the tourbillon, extraordinarily uncommon. Most tourbillon regulators do not have that. You have a hideaway silver panel that depicts the hours lost and then immediately retracts them when they are no longer necessary, and it works bi-directionally. Of course, you have that cool stop second function, allowing you to set your tourbillon regulator precisely. And then on the reverse side, you can see a few flourishes that I love about this watch, starting with the fusee and chain. The chain is 636 pieces. It is 1/4 of a millimeter thick. It has the strength to vertically suspend 2 kilograms, and it works just like bicycle wheels. So I'll show you how the fusee and chain system works. As with a bicycle, you have a mechanical advantage achieved by differential gearing linked by a chain. So when you wind it, you wind from the barrel to the fusee, and then when it discharges, the chain is pulled from the fusee to the barrel. The fusee is geared to the escapement, and as the barrel loses its torque, its energy diminishes, it applies less force, it pulls a larger diameter of the barrel as there is a spiral staircase up the barrel that the chain follows. So at the point that the barrel has the least torque, it's pulling the biggest diameter of the fusee, and thus getting the most mechanical advantage, ensuring that for the full 36-hour power reserve of this movement, you have constant force to the escapement. And you can see, unlike a conventional Longa, the 3/4 bridge has been opened up beautifully to allow you to more easily appreciate the mechanism underneath. You can also see that the capstone on the underside of the tourbillon pivot, it is a brilliant cut diamond. We have the golden chaton fixing the center wheel, and then the chaton fixed by blued screws. This is how it was done in the pocket watch era. The golden hued bridges and plates are made of nickel copper zinc, also known as German silver. You can see the engraving on the underside of the tourbillon, and then the engine turning on the bridge, the root of the bridge for the tourbillon, and also on the base plate. Note that there is mirrored anglage on the edge of every bridge surface, and also that the locating pegs for the movement, they're actually polished along with some of the screw heads. The ratchet, the click, and the click spring atop the barrel. You can see the arbor of the fusee is also black polished, and then we have a black polished escape wheel. That high polish is finished with a diamond paste to achieve that silver shine. Turn it all over, throw it on the wrist. Note the watch has a full deployant clasp, a feature rarely seen on Longa watches. So this watch is blessed with an embarrassment of riches. Stop seconds on a tourbillon regulator, a hideaway dial, a fusee and chain, all of it immaculately hand finished, and at Longa, double assembled, once to make sure it times well, and then the second time after evaluation to lubricate it for final adjustment prior to delivery. So these are special watches. Now, speaking of a watch that offers high luxury, but without quite the expense and complexity of Longa, this is another Richemont brand known as the Red Fire Engine or the Red Locomotive. Cartier has a level of independence inside of Richemont that brands like Longa, IWC, Panerai, and Jaeger-LeCoultre can only imagine. And that's because Cartier makes bank. But when you think of Cartier, you generally think of perhaps watches like the Tank, the Santos, the Ballon Bleu. Most folks don't discuss the Rotonde Cartier collection, but if you want complication in a Cartier watch, you will find that most of the modern complications have been released in the Rotonde Cartier collection. And what we have here is a model launched in 2015, the 40mm white gold annual calendar. The annual calendar is a 45, arrived in 2012, but the 40 launched in 2015 is the one to buy, and it's the one we have here. Now, it is an annual calendar, that system invented by Patek in 1996. It only needs to be adjusted once a year during the jump from February to March, hence the term annual calendar. We have a lovely stamped rosette-style guilloche with a silver satin, almost a gray cumulonimbus satin pattern underneath the radially arrayed Roman numerals, and then we have outboard a little red index that indicates the day, we have the month, and then we have a double-digit date. Now there is a quick set, so you can rapidly set the month as well as the date, and the timepiece is relatively short across the wrist at about 45.3 millimeters lug to lug, so though it's a 40, it wears more like a 36. Turn it all over, you have caliber MC9908. This is based on the MC1904, so it is Cartier's own movement. Dramatically, they chose twin mainspring barrels on a 48-hour power reserve, not for power reserve duration, but to ensure that it would run very regular with even torque release from maximum wind to minimum wind. With the twin barrel, you don't have the phenomenon of a well-wound watch running fast or a largely discharged watch running super slow. Now, it does include a full matching white gold clasp. This is the clasp design that Louis Cartier created in 1909. It was the first ever wristwatch deployant clasp, and so Cartier was not just ahead of the curve, but Cartier coined an absolute immortal, as this basic design has been seen a million times over a million different, I don't quite have the nails to pop this clasp, over a million different models. It is evergreen and gorgeous, and because it does crimp the strap rather than perforate the strap, there's no need for perforations. It doesn't gouge and disfigure the strap. It simply crimps it and then hides extra length underneath the body of the clasp. Zoom out, throw it on my wrist, and at 45 millimeters, roughly, from lug to lug, it's a perfect fit. It's Cartier, it's complicated, it's precious metal, and it's beautiful. It's also uncommon. So Cartier, like Rolex, is a brand that tends to make a few models massively. As a result, almost everyone has one, it can seem. Not this model. This is the one to get. Rotan de Cartier, 40 millimeters in white gold with an annual calendar. Let's shoot the moon and talk about something crazy. In 2015, HYT, the makers of the hydro-mechanical watch displays, they launched something called the H4 Metropolis. A few years later, they launched the H4 Neo2 Red, and that's exactly what we have right here. The Neo2 Red, a 51 millimeter DLC titanium limited edition of 50 pieces, and what sets this one apart is that it had a world premiere for a mechanical watch. Normally with HYT, I want to talk about the fluidic display, and you can see how that works. The fluidic display uses a meniscus. In this case, you can see the red fluid, and it represents the hours. And you can see how as I adjust the minutes, it moves to the end of the scale and then it retrogrades. It has several sweeps to complete a 24-hour day, and at the end of each sweep, it retrogrades back to the beginning. It is both a regulator and a retrograde, but that is not the story. You can see it features Luminova, but it also features dynamo lighting by LED. You manually wind a second barrel that energizes the dynamo and lights the watch so you can read it easily at night. Back to the world of light. And you can see the watch is substantial, but in titanium, it is quite light. We'll get a little bit closer and we'll take a look at some of the displays. You have a constant seconds display, you have your minute display, you have your hour scale, and you can see how it climbs through its 12-hour sweeps. And basically, you set the watch using one crown, this one, and you can see that there are two different bellows. One holds a clear liquid, one holds a red liquid. They are immiscible, so they will never mix. And the meniscus between them inside this sapphire tube represents the current hour. So for example, right now, you are looking at 9, 10, 11. You see where I'm going with this. It is a regulator. There's also a power reserve indicator. Manual wind, the power reserve is 65 hours. The movement was designed for them by Chronograph, which is an upscale movement atelier that designs high horology mechanisms for the glitterati of the watch industry. They have participated in the Harry Winston Opus series, so this watch carries that lineage as well as HYT's own. And you can see it is a conventional Swiss lever, manual wind, mechanical movement on the reverse side, and the movement turns a cam that actually pumps these two bellows. The watch is huge, but take a look at it on my wrist. It's big, and I'd recommend a larger wrist than mine, but it doesn't wear quite as cartoonishly as you might expect a 51 millimeter watch to wear. I would say you don't want to wear it on a wrist smaller than mine. I'd say 17 centimeters circumference is just about perfect, and bigger is better here. If you need a big watch with impressive technology and an absolutely non-generic design, this is going to be it. The H4 Neo2 Red. Let's step into the worlds of the accessible rather than high complications and boutique brands. Excellent designs from mainstream manufacturers. Launched in late 2020, this is the Breitling Super Ocean Heritage 57 Outer Known. A collaboration with Outer Known. It uses a reclaimed nylon Econal strap. So this is a NATO style strap, and they call this material Econal, and it's basically created from scrap material pulled from the oceans, most notably fishing nets, but a lot of flotsam and jetsam, principally plastics and polymers. And so that is how this is created. It is a beautiful NATO that features the Outer Known logo and also steel hardware. So you can see the steel hardware is still plastic wrapped. So lots to love here. This one is in prime condition. 42 millimeters in diameter. It's designed to echo the appearance of the 1957 Super Ocean Reference 1004, which was the first Super Ocean, and you can see it features a lovely dished concave bezel profile with a sapphire crystal that's domed to look like vintage plexiglass. Now there is a ceramic insert in the bezel for scratch resistance, and it is a 50s style diver, so it's not unidirectional. This is not an ISO style diver in the modern era. It is a sporty dive style watch rather than, strictly speaking, a dive watch, but it is 100 meters water resistant, automatic winding, and chronometer certified with a 42-hour power reserve, and it does have a hacking or stop seconds function. The dial is beautifully detailed with a sunburst brown bronze and then applique indices rather than the 1957 original's printed features. You can see, like the original, it has a broadsword, or maybe we should call it a big arrow hour hand here. And that broad arrow features a chevron design inset, just like the 1950s. The dial is a lovely sunburst, and it's wonderfully luminous. Underneath the case back, you can't really see a whole lot here, but it has the Outer Known logo, and I can't quite pull it too far, but you can see there is the Outer Known logo on the case back itself. The watch is easy to wear. It's quite thin. It's only about 11 millimeters thick. If you take the NATO strap off of it, with the NATO strap, it's about 13 millimeters thick, and you can see it on my wrist. It straps down easily, and it's short across the wrist, so it's a great fit for a smaller forearm. Taking a look at something else affordable and technically formidable. Launched in 2013, this is the Omega Seamaster Aqua Terra greater than 15,000 Gauss. Remember, the Rolex Milgauss originally launched resistant to 1,000 Gauss. This is greater than 15,000 Gauss, and it says so on the dial. It has a fully anti-magnetic silicone hairspring, and then it also features a balance staff, an escapement, and even shock protection springs that are anti-magnetic, meaning this watch is effectively immune to magnetism. And I want to say that dial converts to 1.5 Tesla, so that is an immense amount of anti-magnetic capacity. 41.5 millimeters and quite slim at only 13.1. That is svelte for a tri-level coaxial Omega. Throw it on the wrist. This model wears easily. It's comfortable. It's relatively short across the wrist. The rubber strap is pliant, flexible, and comfy. It'll slide easily underneath a dress cuff. It's got a 60-hour power reserve. It's a COSC certified Swiss chronometer, and it is 150 meters water resistant. We'll do a quick loom shot here for the two watches you just saw. And you can see here is the Super Ocean Heritage 57 from the capsule collection, destined, as Breitling has said, like all capsule collection watches, for a short production run. And then here is the Aqua Terra. Now, on a day we speak of our first Cartier in quite a while, I feature not one, but two watches from the house of Cartier. This is an all-time great. You can see diamond paved and crafted in exquisite white gold. This is the Cartier Collection Prive Cartier Paris Tortue Monopusher Chronograph, part of the Cartier Prive collection that launched in 1998 and ran until 2008. These were watch collector type watches. They were not designed to be fashion watches. They were not quartz. They were not designed to play to women or act as surrogates for jewelry. The CPCP collection watches were designed to bring in those who had previously bought watches from the likes of Vacheron, Roger Dubuis, Patek Philippe, Longa. This watch is of that ilk, and most extraordinary is the movement inside. You can see this is anything but a generic example. It is only 43 millimeters from lug tip to lug tip and 34 millimeters wide, so it wears quite nicely even on a smaller wrist. A lovely rosette-style radial guilloche on the dial, and you can see the hands beautifully blued with sunken sub-registers. It features those brilliant cut gems set by hand, and there's even an enormous diamond cabochon inside the crown. Now the crown is also a coaxial mono pusher for the chronograph action. Take a look at the start of that chronograph seconds hand. It does not jump. You press and hold, and the oscillating pinion lateral clutch has done its job. This movement was created by a company called THA, and it was a collaboration between Vianney Halter, Denis Flageolet, and F.P. Journe. Halter needs no introduction. Denis Flageolet is the genius behind Debetul, and then, of course, F.P. Journe of Montre-Journe. The innovation here was the use of an oscillating pinion. You can just barely see it. It's right below my finger. It doesn't look like a conventional lateral clutch chronograph, because the pinion driving the chronograph center wheel is tiny. By decreasing the size of the pinion and the individual teeth on the center wheel, you create much, much less play. So you have the beauty of a lateral clutch chronograph, but you don't have the staggered start or jump of a conventional lateral clutch chronograph. It beats away at 21.6, and it has a manual wind 45-hour power reserve. It is handsomely decorated in a manner that is a combination of hand finishing and mechanical finishing, so on par with the likes of Moser or Audemars Piguet in that regard. You could see the column wheel, easy to see, easy to appreciate. Everything about this movement extraordinary, and a watch to match with a full white gold deployant clasp. We just learned about that clasp with the Rotonde de Cartier. This is a viable unisex option as it wears well on wrists of many sizes. It's for him, it's for her, and again, it has a lot of handsome details like the dramatically cambered sapphire designed to trace the arc of the dial rather than a simple flat sapphire. This watch was not cheap to make, nor was it cheap to buy, though today it represents an extraordinary buy in terms of both watchmaking and haute joaillerie. H. Moser & C does lovely things, but they've only recently gotten into the integrated bracelet game. They had the Pioneer as far back as 2015. This is their second generation of sports watches, the Streamliner. Here, the Streamliner Center Second, launched for 2020. It's designed to chase the integrated bracelet steel sports watch trend, but without plagiarizing Gerald Genta in the process. 40 millimeters by 12 millimeters thick, this is probably the sweet spot. The flyback is beautiful, but it's also very expensive and very large, whereas the Center Seconds model, with its matrix green fume dial, is a perfect fit on a smaller wrist. Now, referencing the 70s here, we have a lovely tonneau style case with this lapping machine radial grain on the bezel. We also have a beautifully integrated and interlocking bracelet that looks nothing like those of Genta. This looks a little bit more like the Oris Chronoris for the case. So the Oris Chronoris star chronograph sort of lends its 70s tonneau form to the case profile. And then we've got a little bit of Omega Speed Sonic chronograph here, but also a little bit of the Ebel Classic and Ebel Sport Wave designs that grew out of that era. So you could see that design influence here, but again, it's not a literal recreation of anything, which is why, unlike some watches like the Chopard Alpine Eagle or the Vempe Iron Walker, this seems like an original execution. So it's integrated bracelet in steel, but it's very much an original take on that genre. It fits beautifully. It is 120 meters water resistant, fully loomed, automatic winding with a 3-day power reserve, and whereas the flyback chronograph uses the Chronograph caliber, which is a beautiful and innovative chronograph movement, that movement is nevertheless not Moser's own. This one right here, the HMC 200, is Moser's movement. It's designed for sports watches with a balance bridge and a free sprung index and a massively bulky balance, which is what you want to resist shock-induced timing deviation. You want a massive balance with a lot of size, diameter, and weight on the rim, or you want a high beat rate. This doesn't have a high beat rate, so Moser uses an immense balance, beating away at 21.6. Bidirectional pawl-based winding system, they call it Magic Lever. It's been around forever, and of course, it is a 3-day power reserve. All of this 12 ATM or 120 meters. You get a lot with this watch. The matrix green dial is a color distinctive of Moser, and then the fume fade from bright at the center to dark at the edge is a signature of the brand. You can see the indices are applied and black polished, and they have the same basic form and profile as the hands, but there are stacked ceramic elements on top of the hands. Moser calls this globalite. It's a ceramic-based lume, and so you can see by night it is very, very bright, luminescent, and easy to read. There is a lot to love here, and Moser, only making about 1,500 watches a year out of Schaffhausen, Switzerland, ensures that any given model among those 1,500 total watches will be scarce in any company. Now, if you want a big green sports watch, but you want to dive a little bit deeper, the folks from Les Brassus can help you out. This is the Audemars Piguet Royal Oak Offshore Diver. 42 millimeters in steel. It features a lovely military olive mega tapisserie dial and a matching strap. And you can see there are polymer shoulders for both the bezel crown and the couronne de remontage, the winding crown. Lots to love here. Starting with the case, you can see it's been hand finished in exquisite form with a combination of satination, this lovely diminishing bevel over the side of the lug hoods, the edge of the bezel rounded off and polished, the top of the bezel which breaks sharply from the edge, vertically satin grained. We have an internal rotating diving bezel, and this diving bezel allows the watch to meet the ISO 6425 definition of a dive watch. That's right, since 1996, there's been such a thing as a definition of a dive watch, and this watch meets it. 300 meters water resistant. Remember, a standard Royal Oak Offshore chronograph is 100 meters. This watch with a 60-hour power reserve, courtesy of robust manufacturer caliber 3120. There's a little case back sticker here, so it's not entirely clear, but it's thick, it's got a full balance bridge, and it's got a free sprung index, so it's tough. It has hacking seconds, a quick set date, a 21.6 beat rate, and a Gyromax style balance. It features the coat of arms of Audemars and Piguet on the 22-karat rotor, which sits on ceramic bearings and winds bidirectionally. You have the coat of arms of the founding families because AP wants you to remember that in the Valet du Jeu, they are the oldest watch brand still owned and run by the founding family, and it stretches beyond the Valet. All of Switzerland, AP is the oldest continuously founder-owned and run watch company in the business. Let's do a loom shot here because this is a diver. You can see that internal rotating bezel is crystal clear, meaning it's a little bit handier and easier to read than a conventional dive watch, where typically you just have a luminescent pearl and you estimate versus the minute hand. Here you can see the entirety of the bezel. You can even set the bezel by night because of the luminescence that full loomed bezel gives you. Here's a watch you might not expect to be as elaborately loomed as it is. I bet you haven't guessed. But if you guessed Patek Philippe 5960p, my goodness, are you sharp. 40.5 millimeters in platinum. This model with the blue dial arrived at Baselworld 2010. The original model launched in 2006 with a platinum case and a gray sunburst dial. A lovely combination of white, silver, blue, and red on the dial. There's a lot to love here. First, we have a flyback chronograph, and it is a flyback chronograph, a feature not often advertised with this model. Let's get a little bit closer. You can see there's an aperture at the base of the bullseye mono counter. It's blue when you're looking at nighttime, and then it turns, and we'll make the adjustment here. It turns from night to day, from blue to silver, and you can see that transition as we pass through 6 a.m. right there. And the purpose of this is not to let you know whether it's AM, PM, because you can't see the sun. It's so you know when not to attempt to set the watch using the calendar correctors. You don't set the calendar when that little aperture is blue. There's a power reserve indicator up at 12 o'clock. It traces the 55-hour automatic winding power reserve of the watch. Of course, we have the flyback chronograph. If you look carefully, you can see that there are coaxial chronograph hour and minute hands down here. So we managed to maintain the symmetry of the dial and avoid overcrowding it by putting the minutes and the hours on a single overlapping scale. It is an annual calendar, aperture style, with the day, the date, and the month. You need not adjust this watch but once in the jump from February to March. The hands are leaf style loomed. There are luminescent plots outboard of the indices. Hands, the date frame, and the indices are all white gold to resist tarnish and oxidation over time. Now here we have a Patek Philippe caliber 28520 automatic winding, ceramic rotor bearings, silicone anti-magnetic hairspring. You have a Gyromax style balance, so free sprung and durable, and this beats away at 28,800 vibrations per hour. The movement is equipped with a column wheel and a vertical clutch. So with the column wheel, we have crisp action. You hear it, you feel it. With the vertical clutch, you're guaranteed that the seconds hand will never jump or stagger when you start it. The other advantage of the vertical clutch is if you just want to leave the watch in chronograph mode, leave it running, there's no additional hazard. You're not going to wear out the chronograph like you would with a lateral clutch. So this watch doesn't actually have running seconds. So I recommend, if you like a little bit of action or animation on your dial, leave it running so you can have your seconds, your minutes, and hours at center. And because of the vertical clutch, you can just leave it running full time and it's not going to wear down or diminish your intervals between services. Throw it on the wrist. It is a beautiful thing. Platinum and substantial. The lugs are handsomely tapered. I can recommend it for a wrist as small as 13.5 centimeters circumference circumference. You see there's plenty of distance on each side of these lugs. There's a little diamond between the lugs, letting you know it is a platinum Patek Philippe of the modern era. Again, you can see just how well it fits my wrist, and I'm pulling it pretty tight here just to give you a sense of how it looks cinched down. You might wear it looser. Full matching platinum folding clasp. There is a lot to love with this Patek automatic winding multi-complication. It's got the AM, PM, the flyback chronograph, the power reserve, and of course the annual calendar. Here's a brand we don't discuss too often, but they make nice things. Louis Moinet is a resurrected brand. Of course, the original Louis Moinet died long ago, along with the company that bore his name, but resurrected in the modern era by Jean-Marie Schaller, the timepieces of Louis Moinet are avant-garde, but incorporate references to the past. We'll start on the outside here and work our way in. This is the Louis Moinet Tempograph Chrome. It's a 2018 launch, a limited edition, as you can see, of 60 pieces. The original version of this watch was 46 millimeters and launched in 2008. That was too big. This is 43.5 millimeters here in rose gold. You can see the little chaton fixed by screws. They actually bear the pivots for the strap. This is a reference to the pocket watch era when chatons of exactly this form would be used to hold pivot jewels inside of movements. You can see that the lugs are polished and they're broken out from a satin finished mid case with the name of the maker. And then we have a dramatically tiered bezel that's a combination of gadroons, polish, steps, and satination. The crown is simple but fleur-de-lis. As you can see, the fleur-de-lis is the emblem of the brand. You'll find it everywhere from the dial to the deployant clasp, which is a double deployant. On the dial, we have a 20-second retrograde, which makes this a particularly animated and active dial. Every 20 seconds, the retrograde hand will jump. You can see just beneath that, we have dewdrop style hands on a dial of rich black lacquer. And then you can see the little pawl-based system. It's sort of a pinwheel with a escape jewel, and it's a system that launches every 20 seconds, and you can see that there is what could be described as a constant seconds indicator adjacent to a blued index, and you can see that there are 3 segments partitioned out, and they trace the 20-second sweep. So the retrograde will activate 3 times per minute, and that's demarcated on that little constant seconds wheel. You can also see that the cams for the pinwheel system, this little ratcheting escapement, they are all black polished, and the finish here is truly impressive. It is an automatic winder. It does have a 48-hour power reserve, and as you can see, the finish is handsome on the reverse side. My favorite details here being the extended swan's neck style click spring and the polish on top of the ratchet wheel. It has a lovely concave mirrored profile. Truly beautiful, but a large watch, 43.5 millimeters, from an interesting independent that makes expressive and distinctive watches. Not a watch for a shy man, I would go so far to say, and it's not a brand for a shy man. You're going to need a big wrist. I think my wrist here, 16 centimeters circumference, is getting close to the minimum. Let's call the minimum to wear this watch 15 centimeters circumference. And yes, it does actually feature a little bit of lume. And you can see that the retrograde hand, as well as the hours and minutes, are loomed on this dial. You guys know, however, because you follow me, that my all-time favorite brand is Debetul. Out of Lauberson, Switzerland, since 2002, they've made fewer than 3,000 watches, and their annual production is about 150. I rate them above just about every other indie brand because of their combination of imagination and uncompromising standards. They make their dials, their cases, and their movements. They have dozens of patents and over 30 original calibers since 2002. This model from 2011 is a re-edition of the mid-2000s DB10 model. This is called the DB10 re-edition. It was available in 20 pieces in white gold or rose gold. This is the rose version. Super slim. You can see it's also short across the wrist at about 45 millimeters, though 42 millimeters in diameter. The dial is a lovely rosette guilloche with an écaille de poisson or fish scale pattern outboard. Note that the dial is printed entirely in blue. The watch has lovely fired blue titanium hands, and that process of firing titanium is a patent for Debetul. You'll also appreciate the fact that the watch includes a center second, which is not common for Debetul watches. Taking a quick look at a feature at center, there is a date that has a quick set function, so it is a pointer style date that sits on a satin silver track. The timepiece, of course, features automatic winding and a 6-day power reserve. This is caliber 2124. Twin self-adjusting mainspring barrels. You can see an enormous rotor with a mass far out, so the lever arm, the effective lever arm is huge. It is a very efficient winder. Here we get a full balance bridge for shock resistance, and we also have Edicron for precise regulation, plus a black polished snail cam for ultra precise changes. You can see that the movement is a little bit simplified compared to the 2024. For example, it doesn't have triple parachute shock protection or proprietary balance or regulator, but you're getting 90% of the Debetul experience here, as this watch does include that 6-day power reserve, the automatic winding, and features like, for example, the twin self-adjusting barrels that have more impact on the performance overall than some of the detail adjustments. So this is considered to be something like an entry to the Debetul brand, and by copying that style inaugurated by the DB1, the flat cases, the round cases, the solid dials, the cabochon lugs, it's more broadly appealing than some of the avant-garde watches that followed, such as the DBS or the floating lug DB28s with their open dials. This is for a classicist. This is a rare watch. 20 pieces made, and this is the first one I've encountered in person. It is very handsome, and the consummate dress watch sliding easily underneath the dress cuff is also, from a pricing standpoint, the most accessible point of entry to Debetul ownership. And remember, they're making everything, dials, movements, and cases. So very few independents do this. I've had many independents say, if we had to make a case or make a dial, we'd be out of business. So it's not just cool to be a movement manufacturer. When you can build every part of the watch, that is true accomplishment. And this is one of precious few, most notably Debetul and Montrejorn, that truly do make all the major parts of the watches. And I believe that Debetul needs to be mentioned alongside Jorn. But don't take my word for it. This is the 2021 DB Kind of 2 Torbjorn, showing the upper limit of the manufacturer's technical virtuosity and imagination. Here we have a 42.8mm grade 5 titanium double dial watch with floating lugs. They adjust from about 49.5 to 52.5mm across the wrist. There's a 26mm spacing, so they have a nice planted stance on the wrist. The watch is only 12.2mm thick, so it's as thick as a Rolex Daytona. All that plus sapphire on both sides and grade 5 tie means this watch wears super light on the wrist. Wrists as small as 14 centimeters circumference are welcome to play. You can also see it as a handsome design and an unconventional watch. For those who perhaps don't always want to be seen with something as flamboyant as an open dial DB28, we have here a rose-lathe guilloche dial, and this is a real reductive guilloche. Debetul does its own guilloche in-house. They also do their own gem setting and engraving, and we have all blue printing on this silver dial for a handsome contrast. The hands, as you can see here, are also fired titanium, oxidized that lovely blue color. They're held over a flame and changed that color. Now, when you flip the watch over, the hands are geared to always run clockwise, so you never have a watch running backwards when you choose to flip the script and appreciate the reverse side. Now, for movement aficionados, this is going to be the side where the action happens. The side where you see the tourbillon, the side where you can see the tiered chevron profiles at the edge of the deltoid barrel bridge. You can also see that the cylinder containing the escapement and the tourbillon, it features tiers as well. Let's follow the profile of this barrel bridge, and you can see that it is entirely black polished titanium, and there is a black polished titanium plate beneath it. Everything here that has been mirror finished has been mirror finished by hand and finished with diamond paste. Now, in spite of being a double dial watch with 2 hands to be driven on each side, plus a seconds hand, plus a tourbillon, it still has a 5-day power reserve. Only 10 of these are going to be made, and they are extraordinary watches. Take a quick look at that tourbillon. There are 2 things you should note. First, it's moving at twice the speed of a standard tourbillon. Rather than 1 minute, it is moving in 30-second circuits. Also, it beats away at 36,000 vibrations per hour like a Zenith El Primero, which means when you hold it to the ear, it has a wonderful double-step cadence. It weighs only 0.18 grams, the whole tourbillon assembly, thanks to titanium and silicon being used. The tourbillon is patented. The escape wheel in silicon is patented. The white gold bolts in the titanium fired blue balance, patented. The hand-shaped flat hairspring clamped of 2 elements to beat concentrically like an overcoil, patented. And the twin self-adjusting barrels, patented. And by the way, they have a slipping bridle, so you cannot accidentally overwind this watch. At center, micro light engraving on the titanium bridge over the barrels. This is a sort of guilloche that is executed in narrow strakes to give guilloche aesthetic, but without a classical dress watch appearance that wouldn't fit the model. This timepiece is accurate, as Debetul Torbjorn watches are designed to run to within plus or minus 1 second per day. So they don't just talk, they walk. Talk the talk, walk the walk, and wear the watch. Reach out to tmosso at thewatchbox.com for purchase and pricing details.